give up, never quit, no, I'm never stopping. Chasing after every dream, failure's not an option. Need that mansion there to see, couple phantoms popping. I'm just aiming for the lead like a famous marksman.
The Winnipeg Blue Bombers select Grady Oliveira.
Grady Oliveira! Touchdown!
The BC Lions have selected Nathan Rourke.
Rourke strikes again!
The Montreal Alouettes select Tyson Philpott.
Philpott makes the grab and slides into the end zone!
With the first pick, the Calgary St. Peters select.
It is draft day, and that means the training camps are just over 2 weeks away. We are excited to tell you all about the next wave of young Canadian talent at the 2025 draft, along with the 6th overall pick in the 1991 draft. Dwayne Ford and a couple of guys, including myself, who have never been anywhere near a draft table. Buffet table, maybe. Yeah, definitely not a draft table, guys. Paul LaPolice, Marshall Ferguson, and of course, Dwayne. And every draft class defines itself differently. So is there a player or a position group or a trend you're looking forward to seeing?
Well, for me, I would say it's a trend, Farhan. And the thing that stands out to me is watching for that continued evolution, I suppose, of the draft away from being so O-line heavy to seeing Canadians playing non-traditional positions and recognizing that Canadians can play literally every spot, and I think this draft will reflect it more than ever.
Yeah, I think this draft has that, but I also love the fact that these defensive backs, and I hate to credit defensive backs as a former quarterback, but these dudes are getting longer and scarier and faster, and there are at least 4, 5, 6, I think, in this draft that can make a real impact very quickly, Lapo.
I'm looking at the linebacker crew. There's a couple of really good athletes in this crew, and those guys are going to be able to maybe earn starting jobs, but if they commit to playing special teams, they can play a long time in this football league, and there's going to be some special teams coordinators very happy with some of the draft picks today at the linebacker spot.
Well, it's not just going to be us four talking about picks. You thought he was out? Nope, we dragged him back in. Former CFL Coach of the Year and longtime executive Jim Barker over in the side seats. He wanted a chair. We weren't really kind. We didn't give him a chair, but he's going to tell us all about the top prospects in this year's draft.
Well, this is about my 50th draft, and I'll tell you what, I am fired up for it because for the first time ever in my first round, there's no offensive lineman. And that is a credit to exactly what Dwayne was talking about. A lot of defensive players. Here we go. This is who I believe will be Keelin White, the #1 pick. Dave Dickinson's also looking at some linebackers. I think he can get that at 8. He also picks 8th. Now, there's only 8 picks in this first round because Edmonton took Zach Mathis last year, who would have been a first-round pick. So that was they signed him, but they lost their pick. So there's only 8 picks in the first round. Second, I have Devin Verasuk, who is a linebacker from Windsor, second in the OUA in tackles, 6'1", 240, ran 4.4 and change at his pro day. So he's a player I really like on film. I think he's got a chance to go very high. Next is Damien Alford, another receiver, 6'5.5". He ran 4.4 and change. He's going to go to training. He's going to go to minicamp with the Kansas City Chiefs. But I believe that he's going to go to Ottawa. Next is Jalen Smith. I think he's going to Saskatchewan, followed by Jeremiah Ojo, who is one of the best athletes in this. That's Montreal. I believe that Jeremiah Ojo could be Montreal's pick, but Christopher Fortin, don't you go to the bathroom when Montreal picks, because it could be you.
We're going to hear from Jim throughout this show, and then when we get to the online portion after round 3, he's going to join us here on the panel. Right now, let's take a look at the first round order. We mentioned Calgary with the #1 overall pick. Hamilton at 2. Edmonton forfeited their pick last year, which they selected in the supplemental draft. And then BC loses its pick. So Calgary gets 2 picks in the first round. The #8 pick is interesting because it was BC's pick Calgary's pick that went to BC trading for Vernon Adams. And then when BC got penalized for salary cap violations, that pick made its way back to Calgary. With the man I used to call the boss, Stuart Johnston, the new commissioner of the CFL. Stu, welcome to the league. I know that it's only been 1 week for you formally on the job, but you're very familiar with this league. So for you, what are the biggest challenges coming in the front door?
Thanks, Farhan. Good to see you here. Good to spend some time in this capacity.
Yep.
You know, I've been a partner of the leagues for 30 years, so come in with that background, absolutely a fan of the league for my entire life. And I come in with excitement. Is some of the amazing foundation that I see and some growth opportunities that are coming. We've got increased fan attendance. We've got increased ratings on TSN, great digital engagement, a historically strong board and ownership group. So a lot of things to work on. I think, I come at it with three thoughts, really. I want to grow the game of football. I want to focus on entertainment. We have one of the most entertaining products around. Every decision we make should be focused on how do we even improve on that. And at the end of the day, we need 9 sustainable clubs.
You've got so much expertise and experience on the television side. One of the big things that attracted you to the Governors, the league's television deal is up at the end of the 2026 season, so you'll begin working on a new one at some point here. So what does that look like, not just in terms of partners, but in terms of how the product is delivered to fans?
Well, I think starting point is let's acknowledge how incredible TSN and RDS have been as a partner to the league for so many years. I certainly know the crew very well. I know how passionate you and your teammates are when it comes to the CFL. And when you have a long-term partner like that and an incumbent, it's only right that you talk to them first. And that'll be my focus. And when we have those conversations, I'm going to talk about how I want to optimize the next media deal. And by that, I think, of course, we want to maximize revenue, but we also want to maximize reach. And we want to increase our relevance with maybe underserved audiences, a younger fan base as an example. So all of that's going to go into the mix. I know that TSN and RDS are already doing a fantastic job of that. In fact, before I left, which was only about a week ago, I was aware of some plans where we're going to work with and partner with TikTok at TSN and sample some games live on a TikTok platform. And it's those types of partnerships that excite me. I know everyone at Bell Media has been focused on expanding coverage of and getting content to where viewers want to watch it. That's the same with every media company in the world.
I know that when your predecessor, Andy Ambrosi, came in, the CFL 2.0 initiative was a big thing, the global player program. Now, as you take over, how big of a priority is the global market for this league?
Well, the global designation is here to stay. It's here, going to be with us for an awful long time. We just had our global draft earlier today. I think we had global players take about 5,500 snaps last year. So they're making it to the field. So they expand our roster. We want the best players possible on our rosters, and I think we should look to the entire world to find them.
Stu, we're going to get you to open the festivities. We promise the names are going to be a lot easier this year. Take it away.
Thank you. It is my honor to declare the 2025 CFL Draft now open. Calgary, you are on the clock.
As we mentioned, Calgary with 4 picks in the first 2 rounds. Here's a look at what they've done in recent years. Last year, a pretty good haul for them. Christian Akanu and Ben LaBrosse both were starters by the end of the season. They went receiver heavy in the 2 years before that with Cole Tucker and Jalen Philpott. Eamon Ogbongbemiga, who's still in the NFL, and Isaac Adiami-Berglund, who's had success in this league on a couple of different teams. So when you win 5 games, guys, you've got needs. If you're Calgary and Dave Dickinson, he was a teammate of yours, where do you begin?
Yeah, and I think when you look at Calgary's best years in the Canadian Football League, obviously something of a flagship franchise for a lot of the recent years, they've had great depth in terms of their Canadian talent. And from that point of view, I think they're a team that could literally go virtually anywhere to boost their depth. You think about them losing a guy like Sean McEwen in free agency, and you think O-line, but I don't know that there's an O-lineman that's justified with the first overall pick in this draft. Hopefully starting a couple Canadian receivers, as you saw their recent first-round picks, that's possibly a direction they go, as there's a little bit of early depth there. But we'll see. I think Calgary could literally go in any direction.
And because they have so many picks so early on here as well, guys, I really do wonder whether or not, offensive line, receiver, they don't have those true marquee players like you're talking about, but does that force players to go earlier? Because you can get a defensive back in the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th round that you might have previously been able to get in the 2nd round, because there's just so many good ones in this draft. So yeah, I would look offensive line and receiver here. If you don't think there's a true offensive lineman like a Christopher Fortin, who's likely to be the first O-line off the board, then you're probably going receiver at this point.
Yeah, I think you got to go receiver. Looking at their roster makeup, they're going to start 2 Canadian receivers. And they only have Maxim Malafont from Ottawa as the only player on their roster. When you start 2 Canadian receivers, you better have another player available for you. I think how their roster, Cole Tucker retiring after just 2 years in the CFL really forced their hand that it has to be something. Receivers got to come in the first round.
Yeah, and they've had some injuries at the position as well, with Jalen Philpott and Clark Barnes have all missed some time, so they definitely want some depth there. Plenty of options for Dave Dickinson, Brendan Mahoney, John Huffnagel, and the rest of the crew in Calgary. Their first of 4 early picks coming up. Here's a look at how the Stampeders have gone with the #1 overall pick. The last 5 they've taken at #1 overall were all offensive linemen, including Pierre Lavertu the last time around. Now with the first overall pick in the 25 draft, here's Stuart Johnson.
With the first pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Calgary Stampeders select Damien Alford, wide receiver, Utah. Hamilton, you are now on the clock.
You take a look at Damien Alford, who had a very successful career at Syracuse before transferring for a quiet season last year. But his 40 time at the Pro Day, the Big 12 Pro Day, really turned some people on.
Yeah, this is the thing that really stood out. You heard Jim Barker a little earlier mention Zach Mathis, whom Edmonton selected in the supplemental draft first round last year. Similar kind of guy. Big receiver who can flat out run. You think about that catch radius at 6'6". Alford, Montreal native, was Syracuse's leading receiver, of course part of a big wave of Canadians and particularly players from Quebec heading to Syracuse to play, stood out there. Again, transferred to Utah. Not much production there, which I think created some red flags for a number of teams and maybe created some doubt as to where he might go in this draft. But absolutely one of the elite explosive athletes in this group.
Yeah, and looking back at what Ottawa did last year, right, Nick Martyr, and trying to stretch the field and get bigger and take shots down the field, 19.3 yards per catch in his time at Syracuse. That was 5th in program history. By the way, shout out to the Orange because they've now had essentially, even though he was at Utah, 2 of the last 4 first overall picks, with Tyrell Richards obviously going to the Montreal Alouettes. But I like this just because of, yes, Lapo, you mentioned Cole Tucker and needing to find some added help because you need to have depth. But I don't think this is a depth pick. I think this is one of those, you always say, Dwayne, first overall has got to be something special. This dude's just different.
Yeah, 226 pounds, 4'4", that's incredible for a big guy. Now, a lot of research had to be done on this player because, you know, how do you go from what he did at Syracuse to Utah? And everything you hear from the coaches at Utah, it's a character guy, great in meetings, he did everything he asked for, whether he was homesick, just wasn't sure why he got on the field, but it wasn't a character thing. So this gets one guy very happy in that building. Who? Vernon Adams, right? What did he used to do? Throw it up to Justin McInnes.
Yeah.
Now he's got a guy who can step in the field. And you're right. This guy competes right now to be a starter. Step in, play slot, throw the ball up to him. Big body guy can catch a football.
Dom Rhymes. Now you got all 6'6" here. I mean, Calgary could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Vernon talked about that when he first signed in Calgary, that he needs bigger receivers, that when he misses, it's usually high. He needs a guy like this that can play. Now let's take a look at the Hamilton Ticats. They've got the 2nd overall pick. Here's a look at their draft. This is Ted Govaya's first draft as the Ticats GM. They've got offensive line in each of the last 2 years. Maybe didn't have as much success in 2021 before that, and kind of up and down in terms of first-round success, but a big opportunity here for Hamilton, Dwayne.
Yeah, and, let's be very honest, very blunt. The Hamilton Tiger Cats were a team last year that was up against it in terms of their Canadian talent. Quite literally, I can tell you from doing their depth charts all the time for games last year, they kind of relied on that designated American rule. And what happened was they had made the trade in the offseason for Jordan Williams. They expected him to be a Canadian who would start at middle linebacker. He retires shortly before training camp. And they ended up with a rookie 5th-round pick last year, Ryan Baker out of UBC, who did a commendable job, but never should have been forced into playing the number of snaps he had to at middle linebacker. This is a team that needs to improve their Canadian depth, and it may sound like a broken record after saying it about Calgary, but they can go at virtually any position and improve their roster.
I actually just wonder specifically because of that Jordan Williams situation, and you never want to say after somebody performed as well as he did, given the role he was put into by Ryan Baker from UBC last year. Well, you got to find somebody to just replace him anyways. But I mean, Jim was talking earlier about Devin Verasuk. It's like, how do you not love that in the middle immediately if you can get him into your training camp?
Yeah, and I know Dayton Black, who was drafted a couple years ago, got injured 2nd day of camp last year, so I think they expect some good things of him. I do think defensively they need some depth defensively to be able to have a number of guys who can fill in roles. They have some depth offensively. They play a number of Canadians up front. They got some Canadian receivers. I think they just need some depth defensive line-wise.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that stands out for me when we talk about the Hamilton Tiger Cats is we mentioned their new general manager, Ted Govaya, comes over from Winnipeg, a team that is built around strength and depth of Canadians. Ted had a lot to do with working with Kyle Walters to build that depth. You got to believe that that's going to be part of the plan for him. Is you think about the way that Winnipeg drafted the best players, regardless of position, the best Canadian players, and they got those guys on the field. You got to think the model's going to be similar here. So it's who do you think is the best player? Don't care about the position.
Well, and when you look at what they've done in the last period of time here, they have brought players over from Winnipeg as well, right? And Canadian players from Winnipeg, depth pieces. So Ted knew what he was getting into with some of those as well. And as a former collegiate coach, he understands how to recruit the university scene in this country.
Yeah, and Drew Olatarski came over from Winnipeg. That gives them a leader in the locker room. Talking to Ted about it, he's like, hey, we wanted to get a guy who can lead some of our young Canadians and still can be productive. So they've, through free agency, they handled, hey, we got some depth at receiver. I thought he did a good job, Ted, of at the end of free agency, everyone says, like, oh, who's this guy you signed? You got cut from another team. Johnny Augustine's a great pickup for them because it gives them roster flexibility. Yeah. So you want to keep getting guys that maybe, like Keaton Bruggeling was a later draft, was a draft pick in 2000. He was a 4th-round pick. Well, he's released by Ottawa. They pick him up because maybe he's better than a 5th-round receiver later in the draft. So I thought Ted did a good job of signing some players late. Jacob Zopp came on board as a practice squad, been in press squad. Gives him some depth at the lower position, so now he can go, who's the best player I can take in the draft right now?
Yeah. And I think more than anything right now, Ted wants us to continue to talk about him because he is taking every last second before making this pick as we await the commissioner. But I want to talk about Bo Levi Mitchell, a player who found the fountain of youth last year. And again, I think we all believe they're probably going to go defense. But as the draft progresses, what can they do to supplement, what's going to be one of the final year or two for Bo in his career?
Yeah, this is absolutely big, right? I mean, one of the criticisms, if you have one in terms of the signing at the time of Bo Levi Mitchell, was this was a quarterback who was ready to win a championship. And as you say, God love Bo, but I mean, getting closer to the end of his career, still playing at a high level, gives you a chance to win. But the rest of the team needs to be at that level as well. And I think the argument would be that they haven't been in the last 2 years. and they're going to try and get there in a hurry. They're going to have to be kind of aggressive.
And I think they've done enough to help him offensively. And for Bo now is the opportunity to, which by the way, coming off of the greatest season that didn't include an MOP, all respect to Brady Oliveira.
Yeah.
But I do love the idea that they've gone out and done so much of that free agency work at receiver. It's like, well, now get a stop. Get the ball back more and quicker and try to make plays.
Yeah, and one thing real quick. They lose David Beard, who's a very good football player. What do? They sign Liam Dobson from Winnipeg so they can now have the depth they need at offensive line and a good offensive line for Bo Levi Mitchell.
All right, the pick is in with Hamilton's pick. Number 2 overall in the draft. Here is the commissioner.
With the second pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Hamilton Tiger Cats select Devin Verasuk, linebacker, Windsor. Ottawa, you are now on the clock.
Devin Verasuk with a 4.47 40-yard dash at his pro day. He's going to be a fast sideline-to-sideline player. He's going to do minicamp with the Indianapolis Colts, but when he gets to Hamilton, he could have an immediate impact.
Yeah, and the thing that everybody wants to talk about with Devin Verasuk is that combination of size and speed. But I talked to University of Windsor's head coach, John Paul Cercelli, about him, and the thing he talked about, and this is what makes him a great fit for Hamilton in their situation. Devin was a very highly recruited guy coming out of high school. He was a Windsor kid. He chose to stay at home. He took pride in wanting to help rebuild that Windsor program, a team that was near the bottom of the OUA in terms of their team defense when he arrived, top of the OUA by the time he was done. He's a leader. This is a guy who understands going through the rebuild and leading a team, taking pride in leading a team to the top. A great fit for this situation, Marsh.
And Coach Cercelli put together a really great defense through recruiting and transfers and all. He exploited every way he possibly could. But the fact that Verasuk was the leader of that group. We're going to hear a lot of Lancers' names called tonight, specifically on the defensive side. And I love the fact that he was the one who was in the middle of all that and running it. For me, you mentioned the size and speed stuff. He's like just over 6'1", 240 pounds, obviously ran the 4.5 at Buffalo's Pro Day. But the one note that I kind of hammered home when I was writing things down going into this is might be the best player 5 years from now. So it makes so much sense from the evaluation of the Hamilton Tiger Cats that they would go this early and feel comfortable making this pick, because I do think he has that top-end ability where it's not just going to be, well, he's got to grind his way through on special teams and we'll see what he turns into. I think he can play very, very quickly on this roster.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying. It's going to take a little bit of time, because the one thing about him on tape, like his football instincts aren't totally there. He's an athlete, he can run around, and what football instincts mean is basically, can he recognize that a double team by these two players is going to put the ball at this spot. He's got to just spend more reps, play more games so he can recognize and have the football IQ to say, okay, here comes a counter play. Okay, here comes an ISO play, and know how to counter those things. It's just going to take reps. He's got the ability, though, and he's fast. And like I said at the top of the show, if he commits to special teams, he should be a special teams demon for year one, compete to be a starter year two.
Player that's got a high floor and a high ceiling. Hamilton just got better on the defensive side of the ball. Now let's take a look at Ottawa. They've got the number 3 pick in the nation's capital. They wound up taking Nick Mardner a year ago, who wound up contributing to their offense. Dante Bull still trying to work his way through after getting fully healthy. They've gone offensive line prior to that, and then the defensive side of the ball in 21 and 20 players that are no longer with the team. So Ottawa took a step forward a year ago. They got into the playoffs. Sean Burke, you finally turned things around there. Where does Ottawa need to go right now?
Yeah, I think that Ottawa is still a little bit limited maybe in terms of their Canadians on the defensive side of the ball, just in terms of that flexibility. They went offense last year with Nick Mardner. They went offensive line a couple of years before, hoping to get to a point where they can consistently start a Canadian, whether Dante Bull or Zach Pelios at that right tackle position. But would not surprise me at all to see them look to the defensive side of the ball here.
And there's so much talent defensively too, right? Like it's wide open at this point. I'm kind of with you on this one, Dwayne, because I think I would love to see them take somebody like a Jackson Finley or maybe a dominant interior pass rusher. But it's kind of a ton of spoils that you don't really know what to do with, because there's just so many ways that they can go, which I guess is the gift of being up this early in the draft. On the back end, Alonzo Adai's been really good for them. I know Ty Cranston obviously has retired recently. I can't imagine them going with a Jackson Finley, and it makes me think like Cleon Lang's not going to play forever. do you go with a true interior defensive lineman? Darian Newell is sitting there right now, and you're at 3rd overall, and he's from just down the road at Queens. That's not a bad pick in my mind.
Yeah, I like, they re-signed 10 national players and brought in 2 other national players, and this is a sleeper. I think they gave up a 5th-round pick last year to get Daniel Adeboye, who is a great trade, a great special teams player, and when he plays on offense, he is a productive football player. So they really like the players they had in the room. They bring that guy into the building, is great. I think defensively, I agree with Marshall. There's so many good defensive linemen here, and Cleon Lang is an older guy. Get a young guy in there Cleon can teach, and get a guy who can be a staple on your defensive line.
Yeah, and there has been some turnover for them on the offensive side of the ball, particularly in the skill positions. They've really kind of narrowed in on who's important to them. We talked about Mardner a year ago. I think potentially getting some depth in the Canadian receiving corps, the skill positions, might be prudent right now for Drew Brown in his 2nd year, Marsh.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that I took away from the playoff loss, obviously, against the Toronto Argonauts last year in the East Semi was you couldn't get a stop because Chad Kelly was just throwing the ball up and down the field relentlessly. That back end, I'm not sure they're going to be able to solve that necessarily with a draft pick. So it makes you wonder, okay, well, you've already got in-house, right? Justin Hardy, Braylon Addison. You've been able to bring in Geno Lewis. It's like, will you be able to spread the ball around enough to need a Canadian to play a prominent role in that offense? Because they've got 3 great American options already.
Yeah, and with the linebacker corps, there's still a lot of good linebackers right here, too. You could take one of the great linebackers, Connor Shaw, put you in a position to have really good defensive depth.
Yeah, and for my money, there's a big drop-off after Keelin White in the receiving group. Yep. So there's some added value to that player right now. Before we get to the commissioner with Ottawa's pick, let's send it over to Calgary. Here's Salim Valji with Stampeders head coach, Stampeders general manager, Dave Dickinson.
Dave, Damien Alford, top overall pick. What did you see out of him?
Well, I mean, he's got rare height, weight, speed, which is obviously a football term, but, 6'5", 225, 4'6". Some very, very successful receivers in our league that don't have those measurables. And the main thing we looked at was his character. We weren't sure what happened last year at Utah, but we got a lot of good reports from their coaches. He was a captain at Syracuse. Just didn't work out for him in 2024, but we needed those questions addressed before taking him 1 overall. I think he'd be a great addition to our room, and Vernon loves big receivers. That's another guy we certainly want to surround him with as many weapons as possible.
And you've got several picks the rest of the way. Just what's your approach to the rest of the CFL draft?
Well, I mean, we don't want to give up too much on that, but we're going to let the draft come to us, and we do have a lot of picks. It did give us a lot of flexibility. So looking for great football players, but I made it a point of character as well. I've said that twice now. I want people that are going to compete, tough players. Go out here and really show you as Calgary that we're going to have a group of guys that's going to lay it on line and really start it off the draft with a bang, in my opinion. So we'll see if we can keep it going.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Salim. Now with the 3rd pick in the draft, Ottawa's selection, here's the commissioner.
With the 3rd pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Ottawa Red Blacks select Keelin White, wide receiver, Montana. Saskatchewan, you are now on the clock.
The Canadian Spider, receivers with the 1st and 3rd picks. Keelin White began his career at Montana as a walk-on, immediately earned a scholarship, bet on himself, and the payoff continues here tonight.
Yeah, and I'm just going to acknowledge, sitting across the room, Jim Barker is 3 for 3, by the way. Top 3 guys on Jim's board. Great. Top 3 picks in the draft. But yeah, the thing that stands out about Keelin White, he's not a guy who's going to overwhelm you with anything physical, right? The testing numbers aren't great. There's not the exceptional size of a Damien Alford or anything like that. But this guy has just been productive. Smooth receiver, great feet, good route runner. Disciplined, and again, consistent production, which is something you've got to like for an Ottawa team that has historically, I think, struggled to put themselves in a position to have 2 Canadian receivers on the field. So maybe working towards that down the road with White.
Yeah, it could certainly change the dynamic of that offense and give them even more options, as you said. I like the idea of trying to give what they probably could have and should have wanted to get in one of the Philpott brothers. now in Keelin White, and obviously having the connection there of North Vancouver and all the rest, you know at some point Drew Brown is going to be leaning on a young Canadian receiver, despite the fact, as I said, they've got all that high-end American talent. And so now you get an option, Lapo, to have your offense have a little bit more variance likely going into this season, because they're also going to change a little bit of the look of that offense this year.
What he was exceptional at was his hand-eye coordination. Out of all the guys I watched, he snatched the ball out of the air. Like, some guys are body catchers. This guy caught with his hands. His hand-eye coordination was spectacular. The other thing, you mentioned it, Dwayne, is breakpoint mechanics. That's at the top of the route. He can get in. He isn't the fastest 40 guy, but he can get in and out of breaks quickly. That's what you want out of your receivers. And the other thing, like, he is a vertical accelerator. He does a great job of key to separation is vertical acceleration. So he gets people backed up, and he can come right down his stem with that really good footwork of his. So this is a great pick for Ottawa. Ottawa gets a young player that they can develop and put him into Tommy's offense, and it'll be a good pick for him.
Vertical acceleration, that was the thing that held me back.
Fullbacks, not great at vertical acceleration.
57 receptions. He led the Grizzlies, a team that went deep into the FCS playoffs, and no drops, if you can believe it. Drew Brown will love that. Next up, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, Corey Mace and company with their first pick. I just said that. Yeah, Damien, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. I know we talked last off season before you transferred.
Yes, sir.
Damien, can you flip your camera?
To myself?
Horizontal, not vertical.
Oh, okay.
Like
So
width,
like
wide, not tall.
It's like this?
Like that, Jamie?
Okay.
Yeah, has he done it? Is that okay? That's what you think. He's flipped the camera like you asked. Yeah, okay. So you want me to take the